Cool. So here's some quick updates. So in the last in the comments in New York, I talked about setting these goals for the next year. We're about 3 months out from there, so I want to do a quick status check on how we're doing as a community. So the goals were, number 1, grow the events, continue to grow each FTC event, explore more domain-specific tracks. 2, create workshops and hackathons. We should expand FTC to include all of these and enable theorists and builders to connect and build. We wanted to set up a Funding the Commons network funding structure itself to be able to kind of fund lots of groups to be able to work on this. 4, we wanted to grow the community. 5th, we wanted to focus on impact certificates and try to start building the tooling and structures for those. 6, we wanted to make a bunch of experiments around impact evaluators. And 7, we wanted to start thinking about the performance evaluations and of mechanisms and structures that we're trying to build. So first, growing the events. How are we doing that? Hey, we ran 2 events in 3 months. That's huge. Shelling Point Bogota, there was a pop-up. It's a new event format. It was super successful, 20-plus speakers, 300 attendees, and the conversation diffused all through DEF CON. There were a bunch of workshops, and 100 people joined the HyperCerts community through that. So huge success from all the folks working on that. And then there was Lab Week 22 Lisbon FTC pop-up today here, 15 speakers, around 200 attendees or so, with workshops as well. And more important than those, we now have a plan, a 2023 plan, with 2 main flagship events next year, 8 smaller events with partners, and 12 local community events in 2023. Workshops and hackathons. So we had a workshop for planning the HyperCert project. I think there's probably been a bunch of other workshops like that that I don't know about around IP NFTs and other structures. I'll wait until it comes back. Is adapter fun? There we go. There's a HyperCerts and Impact Markets working session in Bogota around drafting the development and drafts of development and go-to-market roadmaps. And there's a bunch of hackathons where we're going to be talking about all of this stuff. So there's no dedicated hackathon yet for Funding the Commons, but there's a hackathon for ETH Lisbon this weekend. There's an FVM hackathon. There's ETHSF and Web3 Weekend. We're going to make sure that Funding the Commons is present in all of those and help give people lots of ideas and what are the kinds of structures they could use. So now, FTC network funding. We don't have direct progress on this yet. If you're interested in this, ask questions in a moment or come talk to me after. But DeSci, we did, as a community, help run the DeSci grant matching round, and that was really successful. We probably should have a grant round like that dedicated to this network funding structures. So maybe we should just get one of those things in DeSci, in Gitcoin. That'll be a good way to get started, and there's probably other structures. And I guess Gitcoin is running, so that's a meta thing in and of itself. In terms of growing the community, bringing 3 new people per event and recommended 3+ speakers. Yeah, I think we probably made that with 35. I don't know. Probably we're somewhere in between. I didn't know how to grade this one yet, so I'll check in next time I do this. For impact certificates, there's been a ton of progress here. A lot of attention has formed around HyperCerts and doing things with HyperCerts. There's lots of different groups starting to work with them. There's a project forming. There's tools being built. There's a team that has been assembled to go and build a lot of the underlying tooling. There's other teams that are being discussed and talked about, so this is really turning into a community quickly. There's a website and documentations. There's a V0 prototype working. I think it's at least in a testnet, maybe a mainnet. There's communications and outreach. There's public talks, podcasts, blog posts, and so on. So the word is really getting out there about HyperCerts. The HyperCerts idea made its way back into the EA forum where impact certificates were first described. So that's really cool. So a lot of progress here. Hopefully, but however, no proper impact markets yet. We need to get there. But we're in good trajectory for doing this in a year. Now, impact evaluators. There's been some progress on this as well. Not as strongly as impact certificates, but also strong. There's been a number of experiments. The Network Goods team in the PL Network run 5 experiments, at least with Falcon and IPFS. I think maybe some other projects. There's 3 prototype tools that those need to be open sourced. And there's a few talks explaining what IEs are, and there's 2 talks today. This one in a moment, and there's impact evaluators for ceramic coming a little bit later today. Now, for performance evaluations, of these mechanisms themselves, we do not have progress on this yet, in great part because we're just getting started building them, and so that's fine. But this will become more important, say, in late Q1, Q2 next year. Cool, so that's it for that. Any questions on this part? No questions. All right, great. Everyone knows everything. Sweet.
Just going to comment that Hypersearch Pro pilot is live on testnet. It is not on mainnet yet because we want to run a security audit.
Great. Let's see. So the first thing I wanted to talk, so now I'm going to talk a bit about these sets of things and kind of some progress on these ideas. One thing that I think is useful is that I've been working on kind of like formalizing what an innovation network is. I think there's a very specific construction here of a system to drive work across the R&D chasm. So some of the work that I've been doing around this is thinking through, so I've presented in the past about the innovation chasm, which is kind of the incentive field in the kind of research side and the incentives field in the market side, and the gap in between those. And so worked on this kind of visualization to help us see that. Think about this as a set of projects that are going through all of these systems, and think of maybe the size of the circle as like the amount of work that running these things might take. And with the understanding and idea that there's many different projects that go on. This is not a linear development, so it's very rare that the same team kind of translates everything all the way through. And it's also very rare that it's one single approach. It tends to be that it's this cascade of many different attempts. Like one result leads to many attempts in the next pathway. Of those, some are successful that lead to some improvements and so on and so forth, all the way into getting to things scaling. And so what I think innovation networks are extremely useful for is in this area in the innovation chasm, kind of post-research into that translation, helping lots of groups explore this project landscape to try and kind of orient groups around this development and help structure many attempts, gather learnings from those, provide resources for attempts, so think of funding structures and reward structures and so on, and helps coordinate the work towards the output. So you can think of something like Bell Labs as an innovation network that happened to be housed within a single corporation. And now you might think about like the PL network as an open network that's oriented towards these. You can think of YC as an innovation network as well, though I think it's further down in the pipeline. It's much closer to startups. It's very close to startups. It would need to be kind of like much earlier in R&D to be, I think, to be a much stronger innovation network. Great. So there's been a ton of progress from Convergence Research and others in setting up FROs, the focused research organizations. There's been a lot of several teams that now have funding and are operating. I think that we need to have kind of like an FRO demo day at some point, and I think that would be extremely useful. And also a way of, and through that, connecting those FROs with lots of different funders. There's been some progress on structuring these network funds to be able to do network capital allocation. There's 2 that I highlight. One is the IPFS Implementations Network Fund, which was announced at the IPFS thing, and it's going to be announced again in IPFS Camp. There's a significant amount of funding in kind of like the $5 million range plus this year alone dedicated towards funding IPFS implementations, and this is, again, R&D funding. And there's a private content routing fund just for helping privacy. And so like, this is within our community. There's, of course, the Gitcoin grant rounds, which are kind of like this. And the other big highlight for me is VitaDAO. I think that VitaDAO is not just a blue fund. VitaDAO is an example of an FDF. I'll get to that in a moment. Maybe I'll get to that now. Which has been extremely successful at like doing a combination of grants and starting to get IP and looking at funding some startups. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops over time. So an FDF is a fundamental development fund. It's an idea that folks in our community have been thinking about in terms of thinking about a capital allocator that sits here in the kind of development part. It is sort of kind of like this. So this is maybe spanning the whole thing. This is not an FDF. An FDF would sort of like operate in just a subset of this area and use some of like the ROI of investment capital in a sense, but be able to kind of fund development early on. You can think of PL itself as like a mega FDF, but in reality, you want to have like something much smaller and more concrete in there. So think of like a small VC fund or something like that, but think of like a small fundamental development fund in a field. So you could have like a nanotechnology fundamental development fund or a many other kinds of fields. Cool. So talked about hyperserts and effective evaluators. And one thing that I think needs a lot of our attention is that we now have a lot of the primitives and tooling to experiment with funding structures for open source. I think we 5 years ago, we did not have all of these tools. We have a lot of interest and hopes, but we didn't have the tools. We now have the tools. We now have the capital. There's a lot of groups, a lot of crypto networks with vast amounts of resources to be able to fund maintainers and developers of open source directly in a kind of network-oriented way. There's a number of experiments already, but none of them have scaled in a very significant way yet. And so I think this is an area that I would like to draw everyone's attention to, because if we can get this stuff right and we can create a structure where you, say, couple a GitHub repo to a DAO for funding it, and people could have like a high-level alignment that at least 50% or even like 40% of that funding will actually translate into success for that project that's aligned with the goals of the community, like that would be a huge breakthrough. Like that percentage might even be lower. Like even if just 20% is sufficient, like that might already be very, very significant. So finding good structures for doing that in a way that like mixing money with open source doesn't destroy the project as like sometimes it does, I think would be extremely, extremely useful and a massive unlock for all of these ecosystems. It'd be amazing to be able to just kind of go around GitHub and be like, oh, that's an important project. I want to fund that. Oh, that's an important project. I want to fund that. And have that accrue resources for the maintainers and developers of those systems. One other area that I think is important and valuable to work on is kind of network-oriented coordination systems. So this is like, how do you set objectives together as large communities and have like measurable progress against those? Sometimes in terms of like measurable outcomes like KPIs and so on. In other cases with like more qualitative key results of saying certain things have been achieved. And how can we kind of adapt the tooling that has been very successful in hierarchical organizations to operate much better in this kind of network-oriented environment where we have many groups. So it's not like a tree, it's more of like a DAG or like a network of potential goals with many different groups potentially contributing to pieces. So I think like those kinds of systems are in high, not exactly demand because I think people don't know that they should demand them. It's more like there's a huge need for these and we don't quite recognize that we need them and we don't quite recognize that we should make them. And so yeah, I think we should have workshops around these things. And if you have ideas for how to do this, if you have observed like good coordination systems working at scale, and you're like, hey, this could actually work really well for any network, not just this organization, give a talk at one of the Funding the Commons or write a blog post or something, and then that might inspire somebody to go and like run an experiment and try it out. Cool. Any questions on these parts? Yep.
We've been prompting, come give a talk at future Funding the Commons on this topic. If anyone makes a proposal on one of these topics and we accept it, we will pay for your travel to Funding the Commons. So hopefully that's an extra added incentive. I think the next one's going to be in Barcelona in February, and we'll be, like you've seen the cadence. There will be Funding the Commons at a place where you'll want to be. So come do the work, and give a proposal, and then come give a talk.
Yeah, awesome. So a call for network coordination systems and ways of like establishing objectives and how do you measure progress against those and how do groups sign up for taking on that work and how do you kind of commit to that progress, evaluate that progress and so on, and how can we do this across organizations? Yeah.
Hi, I have good news and bad news. Good news is I spent 6 years at Google, and a lot of what I did was just that. I was part of the team that built Google's current OKRs tool. The bad news is that there's a lot of stuff that you can do about the explicit part of the tool to make it better and easier to integrate with a bunch of stuff and to explain what the meaning of the OKRs are and so on. But I think that, and this is something that you'll hear from me all the time, you have to be realistic about the extent to which the tool depends on the community and the degree of trust and the power relationships and dynamics that are actually driving it. Because when that breaks down, it's just a shell and it discredits itself pretty quickly.
Yeah. There's a lot there. So I think on the one part there, super exciting when I go talk to you later about how do we make that tooling, but for these networks. Two, OKRs as a system work really well in very high trust environments. They definitely start breaking down when you don't have that, or when you don't have a good agreement on whether or not how a KR or a KPI has been achieved, and that starts really breaking, or how these cascade. There's another bug here which has always bothered me about OKRs, which is that they're not recursive. So an objective tends to have KRs underneath, and a KR itself is not always concretely an objective and so on down. And so it shouldn't be. But you need some way of organizing these things and linking them. So there might be some other structure where these things derive into some other O or something like that. All I'm saying is we need some recursive structure where you can actually connect these things. And so groups working on some part know how this automatically translates into success other places, and lowering the lift for humans to have to do that work. Today, there's an enormous human cost in coordination, and that needs to come down. And that can be, it's not going to be completely solved by tooling, but it's going to be supported by tooling. And this is just one example. There's dozens of these kinds of toolings. I just tend to use OKRs because it's very simple, and a lot of people, when I said very simple, I thought of many conversations were they're so complex. But believe me, it can get dramatically more complex than OKRs. Great. Other questions? Thoughts? Yeah. Mike. And everybody, please say your name so that the community gets to know you, if you want to, and are comfortable with that, of course.
Hi, my name is Boris Mann from Vision. Where's the main space to have discussions and kind of float early ideas to look for collaborators to try something?
The internet. I think that's the closest thing I've got. I think there's the Network Goods Discord, and is there a discourse forum? Maybe.
There's not a discourse yet.
And there's a Gitcoin discourse, and we should make one for these.
Okay, and I'll make a quick pitch to see if someone is looking to do this. So on some of that linked things, I've been thinking about. My shorthand has been sustain your stack. So can we get the PLN to use the existing open source repos that they already use and commit to funding their upstream that they, some of this stuff has been done before, but it feels like it might be useful to actually do it with some of these new tools.
Yeah.
So come see me if you want to sustain your open source stack, and let's figure out if we can get some people to try it within the PLN. And I will put it on the internet.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think it's time to kind of try some of the ideas that SourceGrid is trying again, maybe in a different structure, different model. And I think that there's things like Coordinape and others are also good ones to try. Other questions, thoughts, comments, expressions, expletives? Yeah.
I have to say I'm not fully up to speed with all the jargon, so I was slightly confused. But you're talking about science, technology, and open source. All these things seem quite different. Are you intending to incentivize all of them using the same structure, or?
Not the same structure. What is the fastest way I can talk about that? So my claim is that we have extremely inadequate economic systems today, and that most of the progress that we've seen in humanity in the last couple hundred years has been riding on this amazing pathway of improvement that comes from the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment and compounding all of that, and systematically delivering a lot of utility across the world. However, it's pretty good. However, it could be dramatically better. And we have so many examples of where this completely breaks down. There's like this great cartoon of like, yes, the planet got destroyed, but for a beautiful moment in time, we created a lot of value for shareholders. And it's like, well, clearly that points out that the entire like underlying incentive structure of how capital works is messed up. Like there's some broken set of incentive loops there that are yielding this like horrible outcome outside, right? The Fusion Never graph here that I have is another example where like there were these estimates about how much it would take on an annual basis to fund Fusion to like get it within a certain time frame. And the problem was that all those estimates never got delivered. And so the actual funding is that black line at the bottom. And there were all these estimates of like when we would get Fusion, like we'd get it in 1990 if we like invested, in the order of like 9 billion per year-ish. And this is what actually got invested. So it's called like Fusion Never because it would never get the funding for it until now. Now there's like a lot of corporations doing it with some government funding, but it was like not at the scale that it was required. However, when you take all of that Fusion Never money, and you compare it to the digital home entertainment market today, like our Netflix watch, not just Netflix, but all of this stuff could have funded Fusion, right? It's like that's the scale that we're talking about. So we're like saying, oh, I'd rather hang out at night than like get Fusion, 30 years ago. So I don't know.
Yeah,
that's not exactly right, but
just one other comment I suppose you will go into this in the impact assessment things, but I mean, for example, something as complicated as a racing car, like rather than putting out loads of tenures for who can, give a better gearbox, and this is the specification, and if you do it, then you'll get this money. They simply offer a prize for who comes first in the race. It's a much simpler thing.
Yeah, so
then other people self-organize in order to construct an incredibly
so I'm not proposing there's one construction that will just work. What I'm saying is that we need to drastically improve all of the economic systems by in piecewise replacing things and creating new structures. So for example, the fact that we have crypto now means that we can encode a lot of these systems, not in programs that are hard to implement and require vast amounts of coordination around contracts and so on, but you can actually deploy a smart contract, which is way faster. So that means you can you have this massive lever to do things much faster. So can we kind of use these superpowers to try and kind of have an impact on this? And so the claim is, let me skip forward. When you think about science and technology as these two sides of the same thing, meaning there's a scientific process of expanding our knowledge and there's the technology process of expanding our capabilities, these are two pieces of a larger integrated system that involves tons of people around the world, tons of organizations and so on, and it's feeding back on itself, and this is the last few hundred years of growth. Now, there's an incentive problem here where there are two different incentive fields that don't meet, and so there's no significant incentive coordination structure in the middle, and so that is the bottleneck. And what I'm describing is we need better incentive structures to close that gap between those incentive fields. Ideally, eventually, make it so that the bottleneck is in science, and then let's fund science more, but that's not where the problem is. By my analysis of the situation, is we have a lot of research happening. We have this exponential number of papers going. Maybe a lot of them might not be as good as it might claim to be, but there's this issue of everything getting bottlenecked between that and the market, and that's where I think we need to focus our attention. It's building better systems here, and it might mean things like come up with new IP structures, come up with new IP markets, maybe disregard IP entirely and go into a fully open source structure that has interconnect the graph of contributions here and do the proper credit assignment so you can flow money from the end. All of these things are different potential things, and so this community is experimenting with a bunch of these different ideas, and then we're kind of coming together to evaluate them over time, seeing what works, and then kind of rinsing, repeating, scaling.
Thanks.
Cool.
Yep.
Awesome. I don't know if I did a good enough summary, but that's the program. Cool. Any other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, Maz. I really like the fact that you brought up the whole IP situation, because I think with kind of the open source culture and so on, the conversations around IP composability have come up quite a lot, and new forms of licensing associated with a certain technique knowledge or whatever. That could really obviously drastically unlock research, but also so many other market verticals, and obviously speed up the solution process. From your perspective, Yeah, like exactly the patent licensing side of things. Like, how are you seeing that from a composability perspective? I guess composability is more of a longer-term outcome that then generates this kind of, I guess, permissionless collaboration with different types of IP. But yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
It's a great question. So I'm gonna, at risk of plugging my own talk, I gave a talk somewhat recently about why fixing patents is important. To like set my baseline, I tend to come from a perspective that like patents primarily right now are hurting the system more than helping, and they're very far away from what they were intended to do originally. However, there are some industries where like they're clearly helping and preventing like large-scale organizations from wrecking and destroying small ones, and completely drying up the ability for small innovators to actually operate. But that's not quite the case in software. And so what I gave this talk about is like, hey, progress proceeds at the rate of science and technology innovation. We need safe and fast, efficient progress right now. Innovation itself is rate limited by these incentive structures. We're just like this great superpower. Now, patents are this key innovation incentive system. It was designed as an incentive system, and it kind of is that. There's an enormous amount, long history of using IP all the way, 500 BC and before. There's an enormous amounts of patents. There's good R&D about the game theory of patents and how they work, and they're like good conclusions, most of which have never been used or tried. Another example of like things, great ideas getting stuck like decades in the pipeline. There's really good analysis about the environment. Now, there's an enormous amount of patents, and most of them never get transacted on. So there's a guess here that like by cleaning up the patent transaction structure, you might end up being able to kind of like get this like really fast improvement rate. Now, it's risky because like I'm not that kind of person that is like, hey, let's have more patents in the world. I would prefer if we had less patents in the world. But maybe if we can like remove the exclusion, like patents give you this like crazy right where you can exclude all of humanity from using a thing, and that seems egregious. So maybe we can just remove that structure or put a price tag on it that is limited at some of the resources you've invested in it. So if you invested X amount, then you can only claim to exclude up to a certain amount, and if humanity wants to buy that from you, they always have the right, or something like that. Like this kind of crazy exclusionary system is like part of the problem. But for example, think of like how Airbnb came into a marketplace, came into an environment and created a new marketplace out of sort of like missing structures where all of the rooms were there, all of the people were there, people were traveling, and what really was needed was a different coordination structure and a different transaction structure. It needed some standards, it needed some cleanup of the system, it needed a reputation system, and like that alone enabled this entire new economy to emerge. And so that seems possible here. This seems like a bunch of the structures are there, a bunch of the assets are there. Maybe what this needs is just like a huge kind of overhaul. Now, I do want to kind of like remind everyone, like patents are a toxic asset. They're like nuclear waste or digital surveillance. Like because they create these like extremely exclusionary provisions, they can be like used very for create a lot of damage. Now, note that spike. So that was like the patent troll spike, and then Newegg and Cloudflare and a bunch of others were like, absolutely not. We're gonna like fight all these trolls, and look at that. They smashed down that crazy patent case litigation spike. And so that's an example of like coalitions to like prevent that kind of stuff work. So yeah, so my guess is like we need some like program to like actually fix patents, but yeah. However, like I say this with mixed feelings. Like I think they're a toxic asset. However, they are an example of the instrument that was designed to operate here. But maybe we just need new instruments. So for example, to give you an alternative view, instead of patents, what we could do is wire up all the credit contributions of all projects. We can think of all of the people and all of the organizations involved in these projects, make that legible in digital systems, like create structures for that, and then figure out some rough credit assignment. Even if we get it wrong by some percentage, it's better than nothing. Once you have that graph, you can then propagate value from the end all the way through the graph. So that's what the SourceCred project was started to go and sort of like help create. Many other projects like that have explored different parts of this credit assignment problem. I think that's a totally alternative way of doing this that could work super well. So maybe that's better than fixing patents. But we should try both. All right. sorry, patent rant over. Other questions, or should we get to impact evaluators?
Just wanted to quickly note that the Fixing Patents talk, slides, and all that is now uploaded to the Protocol Labs YouTube channel. If you search, there's a playlist called Fixing Patents, and I think there's 10 talks, each about 10 minutes long, and Juan's a 20-minute keynote that was all of the slides he was just showing. So I think you need Protocol Labs in there somewhere.
Sweet.
Yep, there it is.
So you can go and find the playlist there.
It should be the second one from the top. Fixing Patents Workshop.
There we go. Lots of awesome talks happen here. Yeah.
Juan, how you doing? Hi there, my name is River, and I've been studying a lot around natural complex adaptive systems and also indigenous knowledge systems. And I think pointing to both of those are going to be where a lot of insight's going to come out for this coordination issue. And what we're seeing in some of the indigenous communities is the exploration into living libraries. So the library seems to actually be a perfect bridge between research and that production piece. And it's the physical infrastructure of what libraries actually were in the past that created a lot of possibilities.
But libraries don't fund the development anymore. Like libraries, say in like the Library of Alexandria and other places, did fund the work of the researchers and so on. But these days, you can't go to your public library and expect like $10 million in funding for a lab.
No, but that's not to say that we can't reinvent that and attach patronage to libraries again. Because if you look at back in the era, there were libraries, but there was also patronage of certain individuals through that process as well.
Yeah, you could.
But, yeah.
Like you definitely could do that. All I'm saying is, I think that's probably harder than just building the patronage system without also having to force it through the libraries. You could probably just do that over the internet and just enable that coordination to happen separately, and then advertise it at the libraries.
Sure. No, I'm not even saying using existing library infrastructure the way that we think about it at the moment. But one of the projects we're exploring with indigenous communities in the Amazon, because there's so much knowledge locked up in these indigenous knowledge systems, is embedding these living libraries that enable them to record some of their insights and actually make it accessible to the rest of the world as well.
Yeah.
And you know, they have very sophisticated technology that they've been using for thousands of years. It doesn't look like technology to us, but this low tech is hugely powerful, particularly with regards to organizing and coordination issues. So I think, you know, if anyone's interested in looking in some of these aspects, I'm happy to share what I've kind of learned along the way from different communities. But yeah.
Yeah, 2 thoughts on that. One is information diffusion. Like, I'm a huge fan of all of that whenever it shows up, and helping store, distribute, disseminate, preserve, give open access to all of this kind of information, helping organize it. The second part is, yeah, it's amazing what people were able to figure out. Like, there's a lot of important processes that were figured out early that are like nanotech or like deep material science innovation, like annealing in like steel in making in metallurgy. The concept of annealing, of like you have something really hot and you sort of like start pulling it out slowly to like let it cool. That's to get like the crystal structure of the metal to align perfectly, and it's like a nanotech level, not quite nanotech, but like material science, materials technology innovation, and like they didn't have the concepts to understand what was happening, but they could be able to like figure out the dynamics around it to make it work. So super deep things were figured out a long time ago, many of which have been lost. Like, yeah, sorry, other rant, not now. Yep.
Not as much of a useful contribution to this topic, Juan, but I just wanted to take a second and let people know that we're starting a parallel track in the breakout room starting from now till the rest of the day. So there's a second set of sessions going on. We'll be kicking off with one on data DAO, primitives, and governance mechanisms, and that'll be running in parallel with hour-long sessions so you can see what's going on. We'll be kicking off in about 3 minutes there. Sorry to interrupt.
No, this is great. Feel very able to, if you want to go to that conversation right now, feel free to stand up and go there. No one will be offended. So please, like, definitely catch that conversation. This will be recorded. It's a good transition time to go into impact evaluation time. So let's do that. I'll give a minute for folks to move over. All right, cool. Impact evaluators. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a quick refresher intro to what these things are. I'm going to give you some examples, and then we're going to walk through how to design one of these, and then we're going to give you some space to like actually write one of these. And my goal here is to help you kind of, and help me and help others think more clearly about these structures and how to design them, then see we have some interesting stuff that we want to build, and then have good candidates for hackathons and so on. So an impact evaluator is an economic mechanism, an economic mechanism that enables a community of agents to achieve an objective. This is a community of agents that are mutually distrustful. They don't have to distrust each other, but the point is like they don't have to trust each other either. You want to create an incentive structure that is going to enable this community to not just cooperate, but ideally cooperate in a super linear way where they're helping each other succeed to achieve the objective faster with like ideally minimal coordination between them. If we can build these things well, they can scale really far. So a concrete example of one of these things, the cleanest and most simple and highest scale impact in recent years is the Bitcoin block reward. The Bitcoin block reward is a very simple impact evaluator. All it's measuring is the amount of hashes that a particular participant is producing in a unit time. And that enables the community of Bitcoin miners to assemble an enormous amount of computational power to secure the Bitcoin blockchain and dissipate energy and trade that energy for a digital representation of that value. So it's a way of running a market and an exchange, in a sense, run by the laws of physics that enables participants to trade energy and their access to energy for digital currency, and it secures the blockchain at the same time. It also has the terrible side effect of being very wasteful in that process and consuming an enormous amount of energy that probably shouldn't be happening. But it gives you a sense of the power of these things. Another example of an impact evaluator is the idea of an academic conference. You can think of an academic conference as establishing a periodic evaluation of impact to a field. There's an open call. People submit papers. There's a community of reviewers. They review the work. They pick a set of them. And at the end of that, they reward the community with a certain amount of reputational credit. And that credit is useful to that set of individuals, and the community of agents together is exploring the field, and everyone is incented to share the learnings as fast as possible with each other before they get scooped. And that causes everyone to kind of like quickly advance a field. Now, of course, both of these impact evaluators have serious problems. At the same time, they have worked very effectively. Now, the way that you construct an impact evaluator is by first defining an objective, by thinking about who are the community of agents that are going to work together. Think of a measure that's going to that's going to help you achieve that objective. For example, in Bitcoin's case, it's like you can easily measure the hash rate. The objective is securing the chain, and the objective is giving you this like physics-mediated exchange, like a way to trade energy into digital currency. And so you can use like the number of hashes in order to achieve that. There's a set of funds that are pre-allocated to run the impact evaluator. This is a way of like pooling a set of rewards. Now, these funds could be a stock, meaning a stock here in economic term of stock of saying you set aside a bunch of reward ahead of time, or this could be a flow. So it could be a value flow that is coupled to some structure. So you can have a mechanism with a value flow coming through. The block reward is not that. The block reward is a certain amount of currency. Another example might be in the conference case, for example, there's not like limited academic reputation. It's maybe limited only in bandwidth, and maybe it's one of those currencies that the more you give it out, the less valuable it is. But that is a value flow, right? So the programming committee could choose. It just has an ongoing flow of reputation. And you can assemble these things, like the measure, the funds, and a way of identifying the community of agents into this periodic structure that is going to reward their impact over time. So together we can assemble this mechanism. And you can think of it kind of like a control theory loop where you have some sensor. You feed that information from that sensor into a controller structure. which then kind of like figures out some changes to the system, and then you then measure what has happened, and you feed that back on itself. So most, things like airplanes and cars and so on work with all kinds of like little structures like these. Think of the economy being able to like being able to be run by a bunch of structures like this. And so you could imagine creating economic mechanisms, networks of them that work kind of like flying a plane. So you can fly a plane with this very complex set of control theory devices. And similarly, you can think of like navigating a community and navigating an economy with a bunch of these little structures that are automatically kind of sensing where you're going. Now, it's complex and so on, but it's possible. Cool, and yeah, so you don't just have to have a reserve. You could have like an intake inflow or something like that. You could also imagine this as a valve. So you can have some cash flow going, and you can think of like this sensor and this evaluation structure as a way of redirecting the value. So you have value coming in, and you sort of like reorient where it should go, and you just couple that in a system. Cool, so what do these look like? You have some time period at certain standard time intervals. You're going to measure the world. You're going to try to understand how well you've done against your KPI. You're going to you're going to figure out the weighing of the contributions of agents, and then you're going to give out some rewards based on that. So for each, you have a series of rounds. You measure the world. You evaluate how much that has, what the contribution of each participant was, and then you try and give out some rewards based on those weights. Measurement could be simple. You could just kind of like understand kind of the value of the KPI. You could like measure each individual agent's contribution. Weighing could be as simple as saying, great, like you can reward proportionally, but you don't have to. There could be different proportions. So you could have things that are like sublinear or superlinear or some other ways of combining these things. So you could plug in a different weighing function there. And of course, then you can also use this evaluation structure to plug in human judgment. So you don't have to do this automatically. One of the hard parts here is you can't evaluate everything in these small control loops. So instead, what if you could call out to humans and have them decide what to do? This is the case of the conference paper submission, right? Like you have a program committee, you have the conference organizers, that they say, okay, great, program committee, here are the papers, like evaluate them, give us some output ratings, and then we'll take it from there. And so that's an example of like calling out. And then you have some rewards at the end that get distributed out. So you can assemble these things into networks. So they kind of look like neurons, and so you could start plugging them in together. And one other thing worth noting is like it doesn't have to be zero sum. You could have structures where if you tweak the reward structure, you could have a superlinear outcome. Thanks to Evan for coming up with this idea. The idea here is like in a block reward, for example, you just have a certain amount that's going to go out, and it gets divided evenly. You can make the superlinear by just changing the amount. If the impact of the KPI is greater, you increase the total reward, and so everyone benefits. So that causes collaboration. Instead of having this zero-sum fight between, say, like the Bitcoin miners and so on, you could have a much stronger collaboration between a set of participants to try and achieve the outcome together, because everyone gets more if the KPI goes up higher. So you can kind of get into Pareto preferred, the Pareto preferred quadrant. Now, ideally, you can get into like fair and like enticing structures where like just everyone is kind of very compelled to collaborate. It just kind of like makes sense for everybody to just work together and call each other to collaborate. That would be an amazing way of like very quickly scaling one of these things. Great, so we kind of covered a couple examples. Anyone have any examples you want to throw out? Just names of them. Yep.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you're aware, there's a famous result you can't use control theory to stabilize an economy. Hitler and Prescott's paper, they won the Nobel Prize for it in 2004.
Cool, I am not familiar with the result. That's great, I'm going to go read that. How definitive is this result?
Very definitive, yeah, it makes sense.
I mean, like definitive, like the second law of thermodynamics definitive?
It's actually the primary justification for independence of central banks, because governments would try and optimize for the economic situation under pressure from the electorate.
Yep.
And that would cause instability of the economy. So they allow the central banks.
But what if you don't have central banks?
If you don't have central banks, it's much worse. That's why they give the monetary policy to the central bank and they make it independent of the government.
Yeah, so if you go back to like the airplane example, you have a system that automatically is trying to like navigate the structure to follow a trajectory.
Yeah.
Yep.
It doesn't work. It destabilizes the economy.
So I still haven't been convinced.
The optimal thing to do is to say you're going to do a certain thing in the future and then break that commitment over and over again.
But what if you can't break the commitment?
In which case, then it will work.
Yeah, exactly. So with cryptographic artifacts, we can make commitments that are unbreakable. You can pre-commit the funding, and you can't take it out.
Sure. This is an additional thing.
Well, it's really cool. So that you're saying that like theoretically there's a result there that like is seen as a negative like result, that then suddenly like some basic like cryptography can like enable like this leap around this. Like that could be amazing.
It's not basic cryptography, but you're right. It can.
Yeah, well, maybe not basic, but like these commitments are like really powerful. Being able to commit economically is like super, super, super powerful. It's simple like from a conceptual level, but like that's really cool. We should go write a paper. It sounds great. Maybe get another Noah Prize.
About zero-determinant strategies in game theory. You can't. There's a result in game theory that if in a game where participants don't have theory of mind, there's a certain class of strategies called zero-determinant strategies that can dominate dominate tit for tat or any of the standard strategies. And the only way to get around it is to have players that have theory of mind. And the way that they do it is that they negotiate treaties, and they negotiate treaties by building in commitments that can be broken, like what we were talking about.
Is that result invariant of scale, or is that kind of like on certain levels of complexity of game?
No, that's that applies to the class of which Prisoner's Dilemma, IPD, is a superclass.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. This is awesome. Yeah. Let's keep the comments going. This is like way more useful. Mike, wait for Mike.
Gridcoin's been identifying impactful research and incentivizing it for up to 10 years pretty effectively through a very large network of individuals. Just another example.
Yep. I didn't realize that like the ability to waffle on a commitment was like such a like baked-in assumption about like the economies today. Like yeah, because we didn't. Yeah, because we didn't have computers. We didn't have the idea that you could actually have this mechanism that was going to enforce it without like anyone's ability to change it.
Absolutely. So all of these results were pre-2000.
Yeah.
I like that you mentioned judges before, and I've been doing quite a lot of work around land regeneration, and one of the evaluation systems that we're looking at and considering much more closely is what we call birds per minute. So when you work with the land, depending on the amount of birds singing per minute is an indication of the health of the ecosystem. So it's an impact evaluator embedded with the natural ecosystem. And we're seeing huge implications associated with that. It's obviously just one indicator, but birds are a very good indicator of the resiliency of an ecosystem. So I know it's maybe not quite as technical as some of the other examples, but it is very much connected with the natural ecosystem. So yeah, a great impact evaluator.
Great.
So yeah.
Thank you.
More birds in the systems.
Was there another one over here? Or good. Just wait for Mike.
Yeah, just riffing on River's comments about birds per minute. I believe you guys are into the active inferencing and the free energy principle. And so that feels like a very good high-level metric. Of course, birds per minute is an example of that.
Cool. Thank you. Great. So I'm going to walk through how to design an IE. And given that we have 3 minutes left, I'm unfortunately going to have to cut the workshop time. But the viewers of this video will be able to, I'll leave that as an exercise for the watcher. And we can have some Q&A afterwards. So cool. So let's go through how to think about an effective evaluator in detail. So one other mention about IP and so on from the conversation earlier. Molecule and VitaDAO are a good example of like mixing IP in this like new oriented way. Great. So I would first suggest identify the objective. What is the network trying to achieve? Get super concrete and super clear on like what the goal of your network is. And here's like a small network, right? So this is just like in the Bitcoin case, it's just the Bitcoin miners or something like that. So what is that group trying to achieve together? Get extremely concrete about the objective. So in Bitcoin's case, it might be like securing the network or trading energy for money without having to ask anybody for permission. So like that's the objective. Now you can then after that identify one or more metrics that you could optimize that achieve that objective. So you may need, if you have like multiple impact evaluators that are together forming a little network, you might need multiple metrics, or create a function that bundles these together, and you know how you're weighing that function. Because you can't optimize for two things at the same time. That just you're optimizing one function. So just express that function. You should be aiming for easy to measure things. Like I don't think these impact evaluators work well at all if this thing is very hard to measure, and that might mean computationally expensive to measure. It might mean very hard qualitatively for humans to elicit the preferences or elicit the thinking here or value things. Like don't aim for things that are hard for humans to value. If you do that, like you'll get like very negative responses. Aim for things that are extremely easy to measure that you can do quickly and rinse and repeat. Like this is why kind of conferences ask for like the strong reject, weak reject, weak accept, strong accept, because hey, like it's not perfect, and definitely reviewer 3 gets all the annoying comments and so on. But it gives you a super, super fast way of rinsing and repeating this at scale. It's a very simple protocol that everyone understands. You can pick it, you can go for it, and it works reasonably well. Given like you could try to beat it, but it's actually surprisingly hard. So in Bitcoin's case, this might be just measure the number of hashes that you're doing in that second, committed on top of the last block. So that's a very precise description, but that is what the impact evaluator of the block reward is measuring, the number of hashes that the network is producing in that moment in time. From there, we get into identifying the work and group, identifying the work and the groups doing the work. So the work itself is like spending this energy, doing these hashes, securing the network. The group is like the Bitcoin miners and whatnot. For more complex stuff, like this is really important, and make sure at each of these stages, go back and see if like you got it right. Meaning like as you identify the work being done, you're like, oh, is that really going to achieve the objective that I have or not? Or is that going to cause some problems? Then think about ways of measuring that structure easily. So for the hash rate, that you can have some way of like doing that proof of work idea. So like counting the zeros in a hash is like a very easy way of measuring the number of hashes that you've produced. That was like the proof of work result from Adam Back and others before that. And ideally, identify a few different ways of doing this. I want to express that the Bitcoin Impact Evaluator is like the most obfuscated way of doing that. Like, you could have done it a much better way, and I think this was an accident. Like, just accidentally, Satoshi and others got into this amazing result. I don't think it was like, brilliance and covertness. I think it was just like accidentally really, really good. They already knew they had something good, but it was extraordinarily better than they expected. Then after identifying ways of measuring it easily, you have to check the incentives. The moment that you start rewarding some activity, you will get way more of that precise activity and less of everything else. So you're going to get what you measure and reward. You're not going to get what you wanted to get. So like, try and make sure that what you're trying to do is correctly oriented. So for example, I don't think anybody in the Bitcoin community said, let's waste massive amounts of energy around the world and like burn all this coal and like carbonize the planet. That was not a goal. It just happened as a side effect because they didn't have the legible instruments to express, hey, like make sure that this is like good energy. There's an important conversation that happened before Bitcoin was created, where people in financial crypto, like 2 or 3 years before Bitcoin, were talking about making Gruncoin in Iceland, Greencoin. And they were talking about creating a cryptocurrency that used the energy of the world and translating into that. And they were talking about precisely doing what Bitcoin ended up doing. It's creating this exchange mediated by the world and so on. And they were talking about using renewables and so on, and they were using like the Keynes style, like bury gold in the ground and dig it up, well, do something more useful, harness energy, and so on. So it was not about like, let's try and burn a bunch of coal. It was like, let's actually like, make some progress. It just kind of like, it wasn't checked, and so you got this like really bad outcome. So then, after you do all of this and you feel like really good, you're probably going to get stuck here in this check the incentives loop multiple times as you like refine your IE several times over and over and over again. Once you are happy with it, try describing it in prose, make it pithy. Think of like what the IE rewards. Think of the metrics it's measuring. Think of the work in the groups measured. Describe it in a paragraph. Once you've done that, name it. Make it really well scoped. Do not overpromise. Don't call it like the amazing value IE. the fix the world IE, make it like super specific, like the scaling constant SHA-256 impact evaluator, which is like the Bitcoin block reward, or the scaling storage capacity and deals IE, which is the Filecoins block reward IE. And after that, you've got an IE, and like you should go and build it and try it out, and hopefully don't destroy the planet. Hopefully make things really good. All right, thanks.